The most powerful crime boss in Seoul was about to lose everything, and he didn't even know it yet. Choi Min-suk controlled pharmaceutical empires worth billions. Politicians feared him. Corporations paid him. His enemies disappeared without trials, without investigations, without anyone asking questions that could get them killed. But the woman braiding his daughter's hair in a cramped apartment across the city, she just destroyed him with a single medical report. And the twisted part? He was falling in love with her. His 14-year-old daughter Ji-yeon was dying from the same genetic heart condition that killed her mother 11 years ago. The only person who could save her was a Nigerian immigrant named Amara, a single mother who'd filed a report that would send Choi to prison. And Amara's son, Tochi, his mathematical genius, had just discovered how to transform Choi's criminal empire into the medical network that could save Ji-yeon's life. But here's what none of them knew. Ji-yeon had 18 months to live. The transplant list was impossible. The prosecutors wanted total destruction. And the choice between justice and mercy was about to tear all four of them apart in ways that would make you question everything you think you know about right and wrong. This is the story of four people who should have been enemies and became the most unlikely family you've ever seen. Hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will leave you speechless. I promise you've never heard a story like this. 48 hours before everything collapsed, Choi Min-suk sat in his office 70 floors above Seoul, watching surveillance footage that made his carefully controlled world tilt on its axis. His daughter, his brilliant, cold, perfectly trained daughter, was laughing. Not the polite smile she gave investors. Not the calculated grin she wore during business presentations. Real laughter. The kind that made her shoulders shake and her whole face transform into something he hadn't seen in 11 years. The woman braiding Ji-yeon's hair had gentle hands and warm eyes, and Choi's chest constricted because those hands moved exactly like his dead wife's used to. Checking Ji-yeon's face. Tucking hair behind her ear. The casual intimacy of mothering that Choi had forgotten existed because grief and ambition had consumed everything soft inside him. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message from his pharmaceutical division. Routine status update. Distribution networks operating smoothly. Profits exceeding projections. Everything perfect in his empire while his daughter found warmth in a stranger's kitchen. Choi closed the message without reading it fully. He pulled up information on the woman. Amara Okafor. Medical interpreter. Nigerian immigrant. Single mother. Incomplete medical degree from Seoul National University. His investigators had compiled a thorough file because that's what the ghost of Gangnam did. He collected information on anyone who entered his daughter's orbit. Knowledge was control. Control was safety. But as he read about Amara's abandoned studies, her 14 years of survival in a country that didn't fully welcome her, her son's mathematical brilliance despite poverty that should have crushed such potential, Choi felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Respect. Real respect. Not the transactional kind he gave useful business partners, but genuine admiration for someone who'd built a life from absolute nothing. His security chief appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the girl's been visiting that apartment every day for 2 weeks. Should we intervene?" Choi stared at the frozen image on his screen. Ji-yeon's face mid-laugh, completely unguarded, completely happy. "No," he said quietly. "I'll handle it personally." Across Seoul, in Yeongdeung-po, Amara was elbow-deep in medical chaos. The clinic's waiting room overflowed with migrant workers whose bodies told stories of exploitation that Korean doctors either couldn't or wouldn't fully understand without her translations. A Nigerian man with a crushed hand from factory machinery. A Filipino woman with chemical burns from cleaning products. A teenager with malnutrition symptoms he called just tired. But it was the patient wheeled through emergency doors at 2 p.m. who changed everything. Park Jin-woo, middle-aged, former pharmaceutical quality control inspector. Severe organ damage that the doctors initially diagnosed as natural deterioration. Except Amara's incomplete medical training screamed warnings they were missing. She studied his blood work while translating for another patient, her mind working through patterns the way her son solved mathematics. The compound signatures were wrong. Deliberately wrong. This wasn't accidental contamination. This was systematic poisoning with tainted pharmaceuticals designed to cause maximum damage while appearing like natural organ failure. Her hands trembled as she cross-referenced the compounds with pharmaceutical import databases. The distribution channels. The specific formulations. The timing of Park's symptoms correlating with his decision 6 months ago to report safety violations at his company. Everything pointed to organized crime, pharmaceutical manipulation, deliberate murder disguised as medical tragedy. Amara pulled up the ethics board reporting portal, her cursor hovering over the submit button. Filing this report would trigger investigations into pharmaceutical networks throughout Seoul, would potentially save countless future victims. But some instinct whispered warnings she couldn't articulate, that exposing this truth would have consequences she couldn't predict. Her phone buzzed. Text from Tochi. Ji-yeon's coming over for dinner again. Can we make jollof rice? Amara smiled, despite the weight pressing against her chest. Her son had finally found a real friend. Someone who matched his brilliance, who challenged him, who made him laugh during homework sessions that used to be solitary and lonely. She clicked submit before fear could change her mind. The report uploaded with a soft chime that sounded nothing like the alarm bells that should have accompanied what she'd just triggered. At that exact moment, in a prestigious school across the city, Ji-yeon was experiencing her own crisis. She'd snapped at Tochi during mathematics practice, her words sharp and cruel because jealousy tasted like poison and she didn't know how to process emotions her father had never taught her to name. Not everyone needs their mom to do everything for them, she'd said, watching hurt flash across Tochi's face. He'd walked away without responding, his shoulders tight with pain, and Ji-yeon stood frozen in the hallway, realizing she'd just destroyed the only real friendship she'd ever had. The panic that seized her chest felt like drowning on dry land. She'd ruined it. One moment of defensive cruelty, because Tochi had everything she desperately wanted, a mother who showed up, who cared, who made time even when exhausted. Ji-yeon had wealth and privilege and a penthouse overlooking Seoul. But Tochi had love. Real, uncomplicated, present love. And she just attacked him for it. She pulled out her phone to text an apology, but the words wouldn't come. How do you apologize when you've never learned how? How do you explain that you lashed out because seeing his mother braid his hair made your chest hurt with longing so intense you couldn't breathe? Her heart stuttered, just for a second. A weird flutter that made her pause mid-thought. Then it passed, and Ji-yeon told herself it was nothing. Just stress. Just the familiar ache of being alone, even in crowded rooms. She didn't know that flutter was her mother's genetic legacy finally announcing itself. Didn't know she had 18 months before her heart would give up entirely. Didn't know that the biggest crisis of her life was already counting down inside her chest. In his office, Choi made a decision that would have shocked everyone who knew the ghost of Gangnam. Tomorrow, he would go to that clinic in Yongdongpo where Amara worked. Not to intimidate. Not to investigate with cold efficiency, but to understand, to see what his daughter saw, to learn from someone who'd mastered what he'd forgotten, how to love despite losing everything. He closed his laptop, the surveillance footage disappearing into digital archives. But the image of his daughter laughing stayed burned into his mind. A ghost of the child he'd stopped seeing 11 years ago when grief made him choose empire over intimacy. His phone buzzed again. This time, the message made his blood run cold. Urgent. Medical Ethics Board investigation opened. Pharmaceutical distribution networks flagged. Source. Medical interpreter, Yongdongpo Clinic. Amara Okafor. Choi stared at the name. The woman who'd shown his daughter maternal warmth. The woman he'd planned to meet tomorrow. The woman whose integrity he'd admired just hours ago. She just triggered the investigation that could dismantle everything he'd built. His advisors would demand she be handled immediately. Immigration status verification. Employment audit. Character assassination before she gained credibility. Deportation, if necessary. She was vulnerable, single mother, incomplete credentials, no real legal protection. They'd want to destroy her. And Choi had the power to make it happen with a single phone call. His hand hovered over his phone, and for the first time in 11 years, the ghost of Gangnam didn't know what to do. Because destroying Amara would protect his empire. But it would also destroy whatever fragile happiness his daughter had finally found. And Choi was starting to realize that some prices were too high to pay, even for power. Especially for power. The choice was coming. Justice or mercy. Empire or daughter. The man he'd become, or the father he'd forgotten how to be. And in a cramped apartment in Yongdongpo, completely unaware of a storm approaching, Amara was teaching Ji-yeon how to make jollof rice while Tochi did homework at their tiny table. Three people whose lives were about to collide in ways that would either save them all or destroy everything they'd ever loved. The clock was ticking, and none of them knew how little time they actually had. Choi's advisors burst into his office without knocking, their faces carrying the kind of panic that meant crisis real crisis, the kind that threatened empires built on secrets and silence. Sir, we have a situation. The ethics board investigation is already gaining traction. The woman who filed it, Amara Okafor, she's got medical credentials that make her credible enough to be dangerous. We need to move now. Immigration audit, employment verification, discredit her before this spreads. Get out. Choi's voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. The advisors froze. Sir, if we don't handle this immediately, the entire distribution network. I set out. The ghost of Gangnam's fury filled the room like poison gas, sending them scrambling for the door. When the office emptied, Choi sat in silence, his wife's face haunting him from the framed photograph on his desk. Hygiene. Dead 11 years. The woman who'd begged him not to build an empire on others' suffering. The woman whose final words had been, "Promise me Ji-yeon will learn compassion, not just calculation." He'd broken that promise. Build exactly what Hygiene had feared. And now the woman trying to hold him accountable was the same woman making his daughter smile for the first time since her mother died. Choi grabbed his coat and walked out, leaving his phone behind, leaving his empire behind, walking into Seoul streets like an ordinary man instead of a ghost who controlled everything from the shadows. He was going to meet Amara, not as the ghost of Gangnam, just as Min Suk, a father who'd forgotten how to be human. At the medical clinic, Amara was washing her hands when the receptionist told her a patient was asking for her specifically. Wealthy-looking man, expensive casual clothes, said he had persistent headaches. She found him in examination room 3, and something about his posture, perfectly controlled but radiating barely contained tension, made her instincts flare. This wasn't a man seeking medical help. This was a man seeking something he couldn't name. "Mr. Choi," she said, reading his chart. "You're experiencing persistent headaches?" Choi looked at her, really looked, and felt his carefully prepared script dissolve. She had kind eyes, tired eyes, the eyes of someone who'd seen suffering and chosen to care anyway instead of building walls against it. "When did you last take a full day off?" Amara asked, her fingers checking his pulse with practiced efficiency. I don't remember. That's her diagnosis." Her eyes held knowing compassion that cut through him like a surgical blade. "Your head hurts because your life hurts. You're carrying stress your body can't process. The headaches are just symptoms. The real problem is whatever's eating you from the inside." Choi stared at her, completely disarmed. "You can tell that from checking my pulse. I can tell that from your eyes." Amara sat back, her expression gentle but unflinching. "I've worked with enough people running from trauma to recognize the signs. Whatever you're avoiding by staying busy, it's still there. It's always there." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. "My wife died," he heard himself say, words he hadn't spoken aloud in years. 11 years ago. Genetic heart condition. I was building my business, trying to make enough money to access better treatments. But I was too late. She died anyway, and I was left with a 3-year-old daughter who needed me to be strong. So I buried everything and just kept building. Amara's hand covered his brief, warm, human connection that Choi hadn't experienced in so long it almost hurt. "And your daughter? How is she now?" "I don't know," Choi whispered. The admission felt like confessing to murder. "I provide everything she needs materially, but I don't know if she's happy. I don't know what makes her laugh or what she dreams about. I don't know her favorite color." "It's purple," Amara said softly. Choi's head snapped up. "What?" "Yeon, your daughter. She came to dinner in my home with my son. They met at the mathematics competition. She was looking at the fabrics on my wall, the purple ones from Lagos, and her whole face lit up. Said purple reminded her of something her mother used to wear." Choi felt like he'd been punched in the chest. His daughter had favorite colors, memories of her mother, reactions to beauty that he'd never witnessed because he'd stopped looking at her as a person years ago. "She talked about you," Amara continued carefully. "Said you're brilliant and successful. Said she wants to make you proud. But when my son asked if you were coming to the competition, she went very quiet. Said you were busy with important work." The way she said important, like she'd already decided she wasn't. The words destroyed him. Quietly. Completely. They talked for 40 minutes. Choi's scheduled 15-minute consultation, stretching into impromptu therapy he desperately needed. Amara spoke about her own journey with Tochi, the mistakes she'd made, the moments she'd chosen work over presence and regretted it. When Choi finally left the clinic, his phone had 63 missed calls. His organization was in chaos. His advisors were demanding decisions about the Amara problem. But Choi turned his phone off and kept walking through Yongdongpo streets, seeing the neighborhood where his daughter had discovered warmth he couldn't provide. He didn't know that while he walked across the city in his penthouse, Ji-yeon was experiencing a medical crisis that would change everything. She'd been studying alone in her room when the world tilted sideways. First came the dizziness. Then her chest clenched like someone had reached inside and squeezed her heart in a fist. The room spun. Her mathematics textbook slipped from her hands. She tried to stand, tried to call for help, but her legs wouldn't support her weight. Ji-yeon collapsed on her bedroom floor, her breathing shallow and wrong, her heart beating an arrhythmic pattern that felt like countdown timers ticking toward zero. The household staff found her 3 minutes later. By then, her lips were turning blue. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. The paramedics worked with controlled urgency that barely masked their panic, because wealthy 14-year-olds didn't just collapse without warning unless something was catastrophically wrong. At the hospital, doctors ordered every test available. Cardiac monitoring, genetic screening, blood panels, and slowly, the picture emerged, a picture that made experienced cardiologists go pale. Genetic heart condition, advanced deterioration, the same condition that had killed her mother. How had nobody caught this earlier? How had a girl from one of Seoul's wealthiest families gone without regular cardiac screenings? Because her father had been so focused on her achievements, her strategic training, her role in his empire's future that he'd forgotten basic parental responsibilities. Like annual checkups. Like noticing when your daughter gets winded climbing stairs. Like paying attention to the child instead of the asset. The head cardiologist delivered the diagnosis to Choi over the phone, catching him mid-walk through Yongdongpo. Mr. Choi, your daughter has severe dilated cardiomyopathy. Genetic variant, same as her mother's records show. She needs a heart transplant. Given her rare blood type and genetic markers, finding a match will be extremely difficult. And Mr. Choi, she has approximately 18 months. Maybe less. Choi heard the words, but couldn't process them. 18 months. His daughter was dying. The same way Hai-jin had died. And he'd been so busy building empires to protect Ji-yeon from vulnerability that he'd completely missed her actual vulnerability, the genetic time bomb ticking in her chest. Where is she? His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Seoul National University Hospital. ICU. She's stable for now, but Choi was already running. Running through streets he normally traveled by luxury car. Running like an ordinary father terrified of losing his child. Running because he'd spent 11 years walking away from her, and now he might not have enough time left to walk back. At the hospital, he found Ji-yeon in a private room, sedated, monitors beeping steady rhythms that were both reassuring and terrifying. His daughter looked so small in that hospital bed. So young. So vulnerable. When had she stopped being the tiny girl who used to stand on his feet while they danced to Hai-jin's favorite songs? When had he stopped seeing her at all? Choi sat beside her bed and took her hand. The first time he'd initiated physical affection in years. Her fingers were cold. He warmed them between his palms and started talking. Telling her stories about her mother. About the purple dress Hai-jin loved. About how they used to dance in the kitchen until they both got dizzy and collapsed laughing. I'm sorry, he whispered to his unconscious daughter. I'm so sorry I forgot how to be your father. I'm sorry I let you think business was more important than you. I'm sorry I built an empire but forgot to build a home. He didn't notice Amara standing in the doorway until she spoke. The hospital called the clinic looking for her medical records. I came as soon as I heard. Choi looked up, and Amara saw raw devastation on the face of a man who'd probably never shown weakness in his life. She's dying, he said simply, just like her mother, and I don't know how to save her. I don't know how to be what she needs. I only know how to throw money at problems, and money can't buy her more time. Amara moved into the room, her professional instincts overriding any awkwardness about their earlier conversation. She reviewed Ji-yeon's charts, her medical training. Incomplete, but brilliant, seeing patterns the exhausted doctors had missed. The transplant list for her blood type is long, she said quietly. Years long. She doesn't have years. I know. Choi's voice broke. I know. And I deserve this. I deserve to lose her because I've been losing her for 11 years by choice. But she doesn't deserve this. She deserves to live. To laugh. To have the normal teenage life she's never had because I trained her to manage empires instead of teaching her to be happy. Amara's phone buzzed. Text from Tochi. Is Ji-yeon okay? I heard she collapsed. I'm scared, Mom. She showed Choi the text. Your daughter has touched more lives than you realize. She's my son's first real friend. The first person who's ever matched his brilliance and made him feel less alone. I didn't know she had friends, Choi admitted. I didn't know anything about her real life. Just her test scores and her capabilities for running my organization someday. I don't even know if she wants to run it. I never asked. The monitors beeped steadily. Ji-Yun's chest rose and fell with artificial calm induced by sedatives. And in that hospital room, two strangers connected by a dying child began to understand that some bonds form in crisis. Bonds that would either save them all or destroy everything they'd built. What neither of them knew was that Tochi was already working on something in his dorm room. Mathematical models, organ donation networks, distribution logistics mapped with the same genius that won mathematics competitions. He was looking at his mother's medical report about pharmaceutical poisoning, looking at news articles about Choi's organization, looking at organ transplant databases. And slowly, impossibly, a solution was forming. A solution that would require the most unlikely collaboration imaginable. A solution that could save Ji-Yun's life, but only if her father was willing to destroy his empire to build something better from its ashes. The pieces were moving into position. The clock was ticking, and none of them knew that prosecutors were already building a case that would force impossible choices sooner than anyone was ready to face. 48 hours after Ji-Yun's collapse, Tochi stood in Amara's apartment staring at his laptop screen like it held the secrets of the universe. In a way it did. Mathematical models sprawled across 3 monitors he'd borrowed from school, each one mapping something that shouldn't have been connected. Pharmaceutical distribution routes, international organ transplant databases, flight logistics networks, and cold chain medical transport systems. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice carrying that focused intensity that meant he'd solved something impossible. "I think I know how to save her." Amara looked up from the medical journals she'd been studying. Ji-Yun's case consuming every free moment because a 14-year-old girl was dying and Amara couldn't stop being a doctor even though she'd never finished becoming one. "Tochi, the transplant list." "Forget the list." Tochi spun his laptop around, showing her calculations that looked like chaos but were actually elegant solutions to problems medical administrators had never properly mapped. The transplant system isn't broken because there aren't enough organs. It's broken because the logistics are terrible. Organs expire. Transport times are too long. Coordination between countries is manual and slow. But look, he pulled up a map showing Choi's pharmaceutical distribution network overlaid with organ donation databases. Ji-Yun's father moves products across 8 countries faster than any legitimate medical system. His network has priority customs clearance, temperature-controlled transport, real-time tracking, emergency routing protocols. Everything designed to move pharmaceuticals that hurt people. Amara saw where he was going, and her breath caught. You want to repurpose his criminal network to save lives instead. Not just save, revolutionize. If his infrastructure was legitimized and converted to medical logistics, it could cut organ transport times by 60%. Could coordinate international matches that current systems miss. Could save thousands of lives, starting with Ji-Yun's. Tochi's eyes burned with the kind of fierce hope that came from finding solutions where everyone else saw impossibilities. But it would require total cooperation from her father, Amara said carefully. Complete transparency. Genuine transformation, not just rebranding. And Tochi, that man runs a criminal organization. The report I filed could send him to prison. Why would he help us? Because she's his daughter. Tochi's voice cracked slightly. And I think he's finally realizing that empires mean nothing if you lose the people you love. At that exact moment, in Ji-Yun's hospital room, Choi was having the same realization in the most painful way possible. His daughter had woken up an hour ago, groggy from sedatives, and the first thing she'd asked wasn't about her condition or her prognosis. Is Tochi okay? I said something mean to him before I collapsed. I need to apologize. Not am I dying? Not what's wrong with my heart. Her first concern was repairing a friendship she'd damaged. And Choi understood with crushing clarity that his daughter had better priorities than he'd ever taught her. She'd learned compassion despite him, not because of him. I'll make sure you can talk to him, Choi promised, his hand still holding hers. He hadn't let go since she woke up. Couldn't let go, because letting go felt like losing her all over again. Ji-Yun studied his face, really studied it, like she was seeing him for the first time in years. You look terrible, father. When did you last sleep? When did you start caring about purple? Choi asked instead of answering. Ji-Yun's eyes widened in surprise. How did you? I'm trying to know you again. Really know you. Not just your test scores or your strategic capabilities. You, the daughter I forgot to see while I was busy building walls around us both. his voice roughened with emotion he'd suppressed for over a decade. Your mother wore a purple dress. You were 3. She'd spin you around the kitchen until you both got dizzy and collapsed laughing. You remember that. Tears slipped down Ji-Yun's face. I thought it was a dream. I thought I made it up because I wanted to remember her so badly. It was real. All of it was real. And I'm sorry I let you forget. Sorry I stopped telling you stories about her, because talking about her hurt too much. Sorry I turned you into a smaller version of me instead of letting you be yourself. Choi's composure finally shattered completely. Tears he'd held back for 11 years breaking through like a dam collapsing. I'm sorry I wasn't there for the competition. I'm sorry I've missed everything important because I convinced myself that building security was the same as being present. I'm sorry you're sick and I didn't notice. I'm sorry for all of it. Ji-Yun squeezed his hand weakly. Father, I need to tell you something. About Tochi's mother, Amara. I know. I met her. Choi managed a broken smile. She told me your favorite color. Told me you came to her home for dinner. Told me my daughter talked about dreams I never knew she had. And I'm grateful. Grateful she gave you something I forgot how to provide. She filed a report, didn't she? Ji-Yun's voice was quiet. The pharmaceutical investigation. I saw the news. The compounds they're tracing. They matched the distribution routes you taught me to manage. Choi went very still. You knew? About the organization? Father, you trained me since I was 7 to manage financial networks for pharmaceutical distribution. Did you think I was too young to understand what we were really moving? Ji-Yun's laugh was bitter. I've known for years. I just didn't know how to tell you I didn't want it. That I didn't want to inherit an empire built on making people sick. The confession hung between them like broken glass. Choi had spent 11 years grooming his daughter to take over his organization, and she'd spent those same years silently dreading the future he was building for her. You don't have to, Choi said firmly. You don't have to inherit anything. I'm going to dismantle it. All of it. Cooperate with the investigation. Establish restitution funds. Whatever it takes to make this right. Why? Ji-Yun's eyes searched his face. Why now? Because 18 months isn't enough time to fix 11 years of failures. But it's enough time to show you what real accountability looks like. To prove that people can change if they're willing to pay the cost. To be the father your mother wanted you to have instead of the ghost I became. Before Ji-Yun could respond, her hospital room door opened. Amara entered, followed by Tochi carrying a laptop and rolled up poster boards covered in mathematical notations. I'm sorry to interrupt, Amara said, her professional demeanor barely masking the emotion underneath. But Tochi has something you need to see. Something that might give Ji-Yun a real chance. Tochi approached the bed nervously, his eyes meeting Ji-Yun's. I'm sorry I walked away when you said that thing at school. I should have stayed. Should have understood you were hurting, not attacking. I'm sorry I said it all. Ji-Yun's voice was small. I was jealous. You have everything I wanted. A mom who shows up, who cares, who makes time. I attacked you for having what I couldn't. You have it now, Tochi said simply. My mom's been at this hospital every day helping your doctors understand your case better. She cares about you. I care about you. You're my friend, my best friend, and I'm not losing you. He spread his research across the hospital bed. Mathematical models, logistics maps, transport protocols. Your father's distribution network moves pharmaceuticals across 8 countries. What if it moved organs instead? What if everything he built to exploit people got transformed into the system that saves you and thousands of others like you? Choi stared at the calculations, his business mind immediately recognizing the brilliance. The international coordination, the transport efficiency, the real-time tracking. Everything his organization had perfected for profit could be repurposed for actual good. This would require complete cooperation with authorities, Choi said slowly. Total transparency about our routes, our contacts, our infrastructure. It would expose everyone involved. Some of them won't accept that. Then you'll have to convince them, Amara said, her voice carrying steel wrapped in compassion. Or make this decision without them. But if you do this, if you really commit to transformation instead of just survival, you could turn your biggest sin into your greatest redemption. There's more. Tochi pulled up another screen. I found a potential match. Donor in Taiwan. Compatible blood type. Genetic markers that work with Ji-Yun's condition. But the current medical transport system says it would take 48 hours minimum to coordinate. Ji-Yun's condition is deteriorating. She might not have 48 hours. Your network could do it in 12. Maybe less. The room went silent, except for the steady beep of heart monitors. Choi looked at his daughter, really looked at her, seeing the hope and fear fighting for dominance in her eyes. Then he looked at Amara, the woman whose integrity had exposed his sins, but whose compassion was offering him a path forward. Finally, he looked at Tochi, a 14-year-old boy who'd used his genius not for personal gain, but to save his friend. 3 people who should have been his enemies. 3 people offering him redemption if he was brave enough to take it. "What do you need from me?" Choi asked. Before anyone could answer, the hospital room door burst open. Not doctors this time. Prosecutors. 3 of them, with badges and legal documents and expressions that said they weren't here for cooperation. "Choi Min-suk, we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with pharmaceutical fraud, systematic poisoning, and criminal conspiracy. You have the right to..." "Wait." Amara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the legal recitation. "I filed the original report. You're here because of my medical evidence. And I'm telling you, arresting him right now will kill his daughter. She needs a transplant coordinated through his network. Give us 72 hours. Let him help save her life. Then he'll cooperate fully with your investigation." The lead prosecutor's expression was ice. "Ms. Okafor, with all due respect, this man is using his daughter's illness to avoid accountability. We have evidence of deliberate poisoning that caused severe harm to multiple victims. We can't delay justice because..." "Because what?" Amara's eyes flashed with fury that surprised everyone, including herself. "Because one girl's life matters less than your conviction timeline? You want justice? Then let him deliver it. Let him transform his network into something that saves lives. Let him show his daughter what real accountability looks like before she dies thinking her father was just a monster." The prosecutors looked at each other. At Choi. At Ji-yeon in her hospital bed. Monitors beeping fragile life. At Tochi's mathematical models promising solutions. At Amara standing between them, all like a bridge that could either connect or collapse under the weight. 72 hours. The lead prosecutor said finally. He cooperates fully. Provides complete access to his network. Helps coordinate this transplant. Then he turns himself in. No negotiation. No deals. Prison time will still happen. "I understand," Choi said quietly. "And I accept." The prosecutors left, their legal documents feeling like death sentences temporarily postponed. When the door closed, Ji-yeon started crying. Relief and terror mixed together in sobs that shook her fragile frame. Choi held his daughter, while Tochi and Amara began making calls, coordinating the impossible, turning a criminal empire into a medical miracle with 72 hours to prove redemption was possible. The clock was ticking. The donor was waiting. The prosecutors would return. And none of them knew that the biggest challenge wasn't the logistics or the surgery or the legal consequences. It was what would happen when Choi's organization discovered he was dismantling everything they'd built and decided to stop him by any means necessary. 24 hours later, Tochi's phone buzzed with a message that made his blood run cold. Asterisk, tell Choi, betray us, lose everything, including her. Asterisk, attached was a photo of Ji-yeon's hospital room, taken from inside. 30 minutes ago. His hand shook as he showed Amara. Her face went pale. "They're in the hospital," she whispered. "They're threatening her directly." Tochi was already pulling up security footage, his fingers flying across keyboards. They've been watching since the prosecutors left. 3 men in visitor badges. 2 near the ICU entrance. 1. He froze. 1 dressed as a nurse. Outside, Ji-yeon's door. Amara grabbed her phone, but Tochi caught her wrist. "Mom, if we call security, if Choi calls them off, the donor flight is already in the air. If his organization stops cooperating, if they sabotage the transport network." His voice cracked. Ji-yeon dies either way. From them or from her heart. The choice hung between them like a blade. Protect Ji-yeon now and lose her chance at survival, or risk everything on a transplant that might never arrive. And they had 11 hours to decide. What happens next? Can Choi save his daughter and himself? Will the transplant arrive before his organization strikes? Like if you're hooked. Subscribe for episode 2. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens when the donor arrives and Choi's enemies make their move. Comment below. Do you think Choi can be redeemed? Should Amara trust him? What would you do with 11 hours and impossible choices? Episode 2 drops soon. Don't miss it.